Hello, I'm Sam Renault. I'm joined today by Calyn Witz. Calyn, if you want to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background.
Hi, everyone. Um, my name is Calyn Witz, like Sam mentioned, and I currently work at Deloitte, but my path thus far has been very sports focused. I went to Virginia Tech for undergrad, worked very heavily in their sports department, got involved in whatever their athletic department would let me do. And then I went on to the University of Oklahoma to get my master's degree in intercollegiate athletics administration, and then went on to work at the University of Virginia in their athletics business office for about 3 years. So while I was at UVA, I had a chance to touch a lot of different parts of the athletics department and um, excited to get to talk to you all today.
We appreciate your time, and I know just sort of through the nature of all your work, you've been on both sides of the hiring process, and you've got really, really good insights. I'm not ashamed to say that as I've gone through my professional career, and I floated my resume to you just to get a look at it, and you gave me the best feedback I've ever gotten. So I'm excited that you're now going to get to share that wisdom. So this conversation is going to be all about how to write a very, very effective resume. So to start off, Calyn, what does the resume even do? What is the purpose of having one? Why would somebody use it?
First of all, thank you for your kind words. I'd say that the resume is pretty much an elevator pitch on paper. So that means that on a resume, you want whoever is looking at it to know just enough about you that they're interested to know more. So, in preparation for this, I took a look at some studies to see how often recruiters or how much recruiters are actually looking at your resume. And I found this interesting study back in 2018 that said that on average, a recruiter is going to look at your resume for about 7 seconds or less. So for me, I typically recommend that the resume be one page, um, because if you have 7 seconds, you want that one page to showcase everything that you've done so far. So it's going to be your first story, and you want them you want them to want to know more about you. So a resume oftentimes is going to be submitted as a part of a job application, but in other times, if you're networking, if you're in a mentor group, you might also have to share your resume. And for each time that you submit it, it should be slightly varied to the audience that you're submitting it to.
So I like the analogy. This is kind of the first chapter of the story that you're trying to tell in your job application process, right? So the resume is like the first impression. That's the prologue. It's the beginning of your book. And then as you move forward into the interview stage, then you get further and further along into your chapters. Um, the storytelling piece of this, I think, is really important because I think you compared it to being your elevator pitch. And that's another
Mhm.
the big piece of this. I think students who are going through some of these programs are going to learn about elevator pitches. They're going to learn about cover letters, which are all sort of different chapters in this same book. So if we're thinking about, we have one page, we're trying to capture our entire story in a way that gets the recruiter manager interested just enough to want to ask more questions. So what can I put in my resume, knowing that this is going to vary a little bit based on like the nature of the position, the organization, the level? What can I put in there to really stand out in a positive way?
That's a great question. So I'd say, like you alluded to, every resume is going to be just a little bit different. But I think the most important thing is listing experiences that match the job posting. Or if you're reaching out to a mentor and you're trying to engage with them, finding ways that you can connect your experience to theirs. So I'd say a lot of times, especially when I was in college and even still when I was looking for a new job, um, I didn't have the exact skills that were on a job posting. But if I can find ways that my experiences can align to what's they're looking for on a job posting, then I can be a valuable asset to the company that I am applying to. So, one of the things that I've heard a lot of recruiters say, and it's definitely true, is that if there's part of the application or part of the posting says, you must have this certification in order to be accepted for this role, don't make it hard for the recruiter to find it. If they've got 7 seconds per resume, if they're looking through hundreds of resumes, you want the very first thing that they see, whether it's in bold, whether it's the first thing next to your name that you have a certification, you want them to see, yep, they've got it, so that you don't get thrown out the window because they had to look for 15 minutes to find, oh, they do have that certification. So that's a big one. And then the other thing that I've found really stands out on a resume is quantifiable metrics. And what I mean by that is that it's so much better to say, instead of I sold tickets to a regular season game, to say I sold 1,000 regular season tickets, and 500 single game tickets, and those numbers stand out on a page as opposed to those vague statements where I helped out in the office. That, as a recruiter, that's not going to tell me much. Everyone can help out in an office, but if you can tell me what exactly you did and how much value you brought to an organization, that's super helpful for people to know, and it tells a better story.
I think context is really important there too, right? And I mean, if you told me you sold 500 tickets to regular season games and it was a sport where only 100 to 200 people arrive on game day typically, then that's a little bit more impressive than saying I sold 500 tickets to a regular season single game Baltimore Orioles, right? Where they've got thousands and thousands of people coming, and 500 tickets means you probably failed at your job. So as best you can, like, you need to provide context. If you need to show, a percentage, I outsold the rest of our sales team by X%, or I was, whatever it is. I think you're exactly right. These quantifiable metrics are really going to make you stand out in a way where the recruiter doesn't need to ask any more questions about what you've achieved in that sense. They may want to get to know more about you and your process, but they don't need to ask questions about your actual success rate. So we've talked about some good things, right? So we think metrics are good. Showing skills is really good. I mean, you talked about the transferability of the skills that you have. Maybe your experiences don't line up, but if you can show that the skills you built during those experiences do, you need to try to at least tease that in the resume. And maybe it's better to put that into your cover letter and into your actual interview process. But the resume needs to get you in the door, which I know you're going to talk about in a little bit. So let's take this to the other side. What can you do on your resume to get you absolutely tossed, no questions asked, there's no chance you're getting your interview?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and the one thing that I definitely try to sell is that if you have spelling or grammar mistakes on your resume, that does not instill a lot of faith in the person that is reading your resume. If this is the only representation, yes, you have a cover letter, you might have an application, um, but if I'm just looking solely at your resume and I see that you spelled Virginia wrong, or you spelled university wrong, or you just there's different font sizes, and it's not easy for me to read, it doesn't instill faith in me that you're going to be able to send an email if I need you to send an email, or if pretty much any part of your job, if I can't trust you to go out and make sure that every part of your resume is pristine, a lot of times that's not going to get you to the next phase. So what I recommend doing in those situations is to find people that you trust and people that are going to read it line by line and are going to say, "Hey, this doesn't make sense." And for me, the people that have actually been most valuable in doing that is actually asking people that are in no way related to my field. So while I was applying to UVA, I had a speech language pathologist look at my resume because a lot of times the recruiters don't work in your field. So if they see something like NCAA, hopefully they know what NCAA means, but they're it's a good gauge when you have someone outside of the field look at your resume to be able to tell whether or not the words that you're using are universal. That anyone who picks up, if your resume fell on the side of a street, anyone that picks up that resume is going to be able to read it and comprehend it no matter what field they're in. So that's a big thing. Another thing, make sure that you have a professional resume. If I have to email twyhard101 at gmail.com or one tough cookie at gmail.com, I'm probably not going to. So make sure that you have a professional email, and it can be your school email or just mine is very simple, my name at gmail.com. Um, and then another thing that isn't a reason to throw out a resume, but something to keep in mind is probably to err on the side of not putting a picture on a resume. Um, and I say that because it introduces a lot of unconscious biases to the process of decision making. So it you want to do everything that you can to get your foot in the door. So sometimes, unfortunately, the person reviewing your resume isn't going to hold the same beliefs that you do. So, not having that resume, not having that picture on your resume can sometimes help you get to the interview process.
Going back to the spelling mistakes and the grammar issues and things along those lines, I've always thought about it as an attention to detail, which is a skill that I hold really, really high when I'm thinking of
Definitely.
considering candidates. And presumably, like if you're applying to a job at my company, I want that to be your dream. Like I think of myself and my company very highly, and I want you to as well. And if the most important application of your life, which is applying to work for me, you couldn't even be bothered to spell my company's name right, like that's just a symbolic of a total business on your part. And I think, Calyn, what you're saying about having other people is big, because if I'm looking at my resume 500 times, I sleep on it, I wake up and I look at it again, I'm going to glaze over things. If you just get fatigue and looking at your own writing over and over. So having somebody else triple check it for you, absolutely critical. Could not agree more on that.
Definitely. And I'll mention that I'm saying this as someone who has not done it absolutely perfect. I spelled Virginia wrong on my resume, which is why it's an example that comes top of mind. I applied to probably 2 or 3 jobs with that spelling error, and I knew why they didn't call me back. So, I I think making sure that you've got people in your corner that are willing to call you out on those mistakes is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you need honest mentors as best you can.
Yep.
So let's think about this. I'm a student now. Maybe I found a job that I like or a few jobs that I like. I need to start putting my resume together. What's the first step? Like, how do I start this process?
So, one of the best resources that I've been able to find and use is from Chicago Booth, which I'll pull it up here. Hopefully, it'll work. Um, can you see that? And I'll share this as well. But this is from actually from a business school. So Chicago Booth is an MBA school, and they have a standardized template that everyone that goes there and graduates from there should follow. And it's actually all you don't have to follow it to a T. It's a pretty good place to start. Um, so I'll go to the second page that shows you this is Bruce Wayne's resume. But it's one page. Make sure that they can read your resume. Make sure that it's not in cursive and that you don't have 4 million words on the page that it's not going to print if they go out and print it. So we'll share this so that you can get just a broader sense of what it means to pull together a resume. But I think when you're first starting out and maybe you have a resume that you pull from online or you use a template in Microsoft Words, it's really helpful to go out and look for some of those job postings that you're interested in. because a lot of times those job postings have these are the experiences that we want. And while you can't go in and copy and paste them into your resume, it might spark some ideas in your head on what you should be including. Um, so that's one way that I do it. The other way is look for people that hold the jobs that you want. So when I was applying for jobs in the athletics business office, I was looking at people that worked in that field and looked at what experiences they had on their LinkedIn resumes or their profiles, and taking some of those ideas and making sure that my resume matched up to what the expectations for someone in that role might be. And as I said earlier, odds are that transfer transferability of skills is going to be your best shot. So for me, when I applied for the University of Virginia job, I had no experience in procurement. But I was able to use other things that I had done to show that I could do it and that I was willing to learn, which I think came through across the resume. Um, one, I'm going to add one thing, which doesn't really answer your question, Sam, but um, if you've held similar roles, so if you've been a secretary for three different places, try to find unique things that you did in each of those roles rather than saying, I managed the senior associate athletic director's calendar on all three roles. Find unique things so that as a recruiter, I'm not seeing, I I know you can do that already, but now you told me again you can do that. Great. And you told me a third time you can do that, but I already knew you could do that. So show them different things that you're capable of. Um, does that answer the question?
It does, yeah. And I think it's important, you brought this up now, that as you see these job descriptions and you see people who have done this job before you, you'll start to learn a lot of the lingo that they expect of somebody in that role. And you can do yourself a big service by starting to speak that language from the very beginning and including it. I can't remember if we mentioned it yet, but I know, especially if you're going through like a Teamwork Online or one of those sort of big box application platforms, they've got filters set up. And if you don't have certain keywords that show up, you're not even going to make it to a human being to review your resume. So the more you can pull specific words, specific language, and phrases from the job posting, chances are the person who wrote that job posting is probably going to be reviewing some of these applications. And if they see language that they like in your writing, they're going to like you more implicitly. So I think that's a really important thing to note there too.
Yeah, Teamworks Online is an interesting one. One of my first roles in sports was actually with the Baltimore Ravens, and I had no experience at that point. But um, I think some of the keywords that I threw out with event operations in just student organized events, they were able to pull out some keywords that flagged my resume as, okay, this person is probably capable of fulfilling this role. So great point. There are definitely a lot of companies that when they receive a lot of resumes, it's easier to just, you know what, I need someone that has mentioned the word equipment if I'm hiring them for the equipment room. So
And this goes back
good
to
point.
your original
Yeah.
point of they're only going to look at it for 7 seconds, and so these words need to jump off the page. Make sure. I mean, don't just like bold specific words in a place where it's going to be easy to see them. Don't have them buried in a long paragraph of copy that people are just going to get lost skimming through it.
Definitely.
Um, all right, so now we have the job that we're interested in. We've written our resume. What's the next step? What do I do before I actually submit my application? What should I do with my completed resume draft?
So I did kind of mention this one, but make sure that I'm going to hit it home. Make sure that you have people that are in your corner that are going to review your resume, industry and not industry professionals that can tell you, I probably wouldn't use this acronym, or um, just making sure that everything is uniform. So you mentioned it just briefly there, but if I think that every part of my resume is important. I don't want to bold 70% of the page because then none of it is worth it. So finding those keywords that are going to matter to the person viewing it. So one of the things that I do is I actually have like a 5-page resume that every time that I'm applying to a job or sending my resume to someone in a mentorship group, I take those 5 pages, I make a copy of the document, and I just pare it down until I get to 1 page because I wanna make sure that everything that on that page is relevant to the person that's gonna view it. So, I don't include all of the jobs at this point, and, for high school and college-aged kids, that you might be including every single thing that you do, but at that point, you're trying to show them that you're capable of the job. Um, One thing before you submit it to anywhere is to make sure that you convert it to a PDF. There are so many softwares out there that when you submit it to a Workday system, when you upload it in a Word format, it changes it to like 3 pages, the font changes, and none of the formatting that you spent hours working on matters anymore. So make sure you do that to avoid any of those sorts of mishaps. It's a simple step to take right before you submit it.
That is very good advice. I recommend that as well. And for those of you who don't know how to do that, there's two different ways you can accomplish that. If you're, at least I can speak from a PC perspective. If you're writing in Word, you can either save it as a PDF or you can print it as a PDF. So easy to
You
do.
Yep. There's also some like online convert to PDF.com sort of websites that allow you to do that as well. So
Perfect. Calyn, any last pearls of wisdom? Any last things you want to impart on everybody?
make sure it's 1 page.
One page it is.
One page. One page. If you've got 7 seconds and they're not even going to flip to the second page, that first page is the most important. So
Got it.
that's
Love it.
biggest thing to hit home.
I
And
like
good
it.
luck.
Well, thank you so much for the time and wisdom. We appreciate it. It was good chatting with you.
You as well. Take care.